Hey, what's up everybody? This is Swagadon with Swagger Gaming, bringing you another Mage Tower Challenge guide. If you don't want to hear me talk and just want to see the encounter played through, I have provided a link to that video down in the description. In this guide, we'll be talking about the Demonology Warlock. You must complete the God Queen's Fury scenario, in which you will need to defeat Sigryn and her 2 lackeys. Before we jump into talent choices, I wanted to remind everyone that I do not play Warlock beyond the Mage Tower challenges, and that the talents and rotations I will be discussing in this guide are probably not what you want to be using for dungeons and raiding, and are just what worked for me to complete this challenge. If you have any suggestions that may help out others, please feel free to comment below. For the tier 1 talent, I chose Demonic Calling. This is a passive spell and can produce more damage than Shadowy Inspiration when fighting multiple targets. For tier 2, I took Impending Doom for the passive damage increase. This is an extremely strong talent for this council style fight because you are dealing more doom damage faster to 3 targets that share the same health pool. Tier 3 comes down to your preference. I personally took Mortal Coil because of the heal, and it's what I'm most comfortable using. Hand of Doom is a higher DPS talent for multiple targets, but the 3 bosses are generally spread out in this fight, so that damage increase is somewhat unreliable. For this reason, I took Power Trip for this tier. I took Demon Skin for the tier 5 talent because it is the highest damage reduction available. However, if you're having movement issues in this encounter, Burning Rush can be a solid choice as well. For tier 6, I took Grimoire of Supremacy because it was the passive option and it is not that far behind the other 2 in terms of damage. If you want to max out your DPS, you should take Grimoire of Service. For our tier 7 talent, I chose Dark Glare because of the AoE damage. Dark Glare will attack anything with Doom on it, so it should be hitting all 3 bosses. I believe Soul Conduit can be a great option here as well, as it is passive and does equivalent damage against 3 targets. I'm not going to get too much into rotation, but a great place to start would be to check out the basic rotation guide on Icyveins. I will leave a link to that page down in the description. I was 921 item level when I completed this encounter. I was rocking Prydaz and Stretton's Sleepless Shackles, which are the Affliction Warlock bracers. The braces were purely for the stat stick, but Prydaz is extremely helpful as there were multiple times I got pretty low. I was also using 2 set tier 21 from LFR, which gives you a 4% damage boost to your next called Dreadstalkers for each soul shard spent on Hand of Gul'dan. If you're having issues with this fight and do not already have it, I recommend suffering through LFR to get this bonus. This fight is not overly difficult, but it is long and full of one-shot mechanics, so it requires a good amount of focus to complete. It is also very possible to be killed by RNG or bug in this encounter, so don't get too frustrated if that happens to you. There are 3 total bosses that each have multiple abilities and several general encounter mechanics as well. I will break these all up into 4 sections and go over each of the mechanics individually. Sigryn is the main baddie of this encounter and has 2 abilities. Beyond these, she can also empower her 2 allies, but more on that later. To start the encounter, you will need to engage Sigryn, as the other 2 will not be targetable. Sigryn's first ability is a spear throw. She will toss a spear at you, and it will leave a puddle of fel on the ground. The best way to counter this is to keep it on the edge of the room as much as possible, because there are other mechanics it can cover up if dropped in the middle. These puddles will eventually disappear, but they do a decent amount of damage, so avoid them as much as possible. The second and main ability she casts is called Blood of the Father. You'll need to fear her, ideally before the cast goes off. This ability is a channel that does a very high amount of damage, and if not dealt with quickly, it will kill you. The reason you want to fear her before the cast goes off is if you do not and the fear breaks from damage, she will continue her channel. One thing important to note is that your fear has diminishing returns on it, so after 3 fears, she will become immune for a short period of time. For this reason, you cannot keep her permanently feared. Jarl Velbrand is the melee opponent you will face. He has a few abilities and can kill you if not dealt with properly, but is mostly just annoying. The main ability is a Fixate, in which he will target you and do increased damage if allowed to hit you. You'll be able to take a few hits from this, but I do not recommend taking it. Any CC should affect him, so you can fear if necessary, but I found it easier to just save my Mortal Coil and run away. When he is not fixated on you, he will either be hitting you with normal melee attacks which do negligible damage, or standing still and tossing axes that move in circular patterns. These axes will do a moderate amount of damage and knock you down, so try to avoid them as much as possible. You can take this time to move to the opposite side of the arena as well to deal with his other mechanics. His last mechanic is when Sigryn empowers him. He will start spinning and essentially create a whirlwind on him that will pull you in. The closer you are to him, the harder the pull is and the more damage it will deal. You can simply run to the other side of the arena and continue to DPS. Runeseer Faljar is the caster in the encounter. He will sitting in the back and casting shadow bolts at you most of the time, and there's really nothing you can do about this. When empowered, Runeseer Faljar will gain a shield and start a cast called Ancestral Knowledge. If this cast goes off, you will most likely be one-shot and die. You will need to DPS through a shield and interrupt the cast. Because Warlocks only have the one interrupt, you will want to save it for this ability as you can cast it quite frequently, especially towards the end of the encounter. Several general encounter mechanics will also happen throughout the fight. The first one is the runes. 3 purple runes will spawn on the ground and will start to shrink. You will need to run over them to pop them before they disappear, or they will explode and do a large amount of damage. These will spawn in 3 different sizes, so it is always best to try and hit the smaller ones first. I did not try to use my pet to counter these, but I know in the Frost Mage challenge the elemental pet was able to stand on the rune to cancel it. The other general encounter ability is the Dark Valkyr. They will spawn on one side of the room, north, south, east, or west, and shoot across to the other side. If this hits you, it is usually a one-shot mechanic unless you are shielded. There will always be a gap in the line, so find the spot and make sure you're not hit. Unfortunately, it is also possible for Sigryn to bug out when feared out of the circle. This is really beyond your control and can cause all 3 enemies to despawn. You'll have to hearth out and fly back to Broken Shore to try again. It is also possible that one or multiple of the rune spawns won't be visible. They're still there and will still explode, so if you see only 2, try running over where you think the 3rd might be to counter this. I used a macro to cast Fear on my focus target, so I didn't have to switch to Sigryn when she cast Blood of the Father. I have posted that in the description below. Make sure if you use this to keep Sigryn as your focus target or it won't work. For Weakauras, I use encounter reminders uploaded by the Steel Phantom on wago.io. My UI also uses Ipse's Warlock Weakaura HUD, and both of these can be found in the description below. This encounter is probably on the easier side compared to the other 6, but does take focus as you can easily be one-shot by several mechanics. For the Warlock specifically, I had a harder time breaking through the shield than on other classes I have completed this challenge on, but the sustained multi-target damage is nice overall. I think this is one of the cooler appearances as well. Do you want to see more or different information in these videos moving forward? What class and spec would you like to see next? Thanks for watching and have a great one.